Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Plus Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ plus communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. LGBTQ plus college students might be on summer break, but their universities are changing support services while they are gone. What is campus going to look like when students return? A pastor in Indiana recently gave a sermon that went all kinds of viral. Just how far from love thy neighbor did his words stray? The WNBA has announced that they are expanding to 3 new cities. What does that mean for LGBTQ plus fans? And legislation around trans athletes. There actually was one that didn't go horribly. Is that even possible? We're going to find out, because joining us this week to talk about those stories and so many more, freelance editor and writer and former editor of the Philadelphia Gay News, and I must say, an original panelist on the pilot of This News is So Gay 3.5 years ago, Jason Villemez. Jason, it's so great to have you back with me.
Oh, Ken, it's so good to be back. Congratulations. It's been a long 3 years for you, I know.
Interminably long. Thanks so much, Jason. Managing editor of Windy City Times, Jake Wittich. Hello, Jake.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And digital editor for Right Next Door, Indiana Public Broadcasting, Lauren Chapman. Great to have you here, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, our LGBTQ plus reporters roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. LGBTQ plus college students are going to return this fall to an entirely different landscape as institutions of higher education are making changes to their LGBTQ plus offerings, at least as they look public-facing wise. Jason, as you are geographically closest, tell us what's going on at Harvard.
Geographically closest, and I used to live in Boston, so
There it is.
I have a little connection to the area. Donald Trump's war against the Ivy League continues. Harvard is one of the top targets for him. He's trying to withdraw all federal funding for them. And one issue that he has is DEI and anything related to publicly supporting LGBTQ people, students, faculty, what have you. Harvard is in a tricky situation. So as part of this sort of capitulation that all these universities are having to do, they removed the website for their Office of BGLTQ Affairs. Harvard uses BGLTQ because they alphabetized the first 4 letters. They thought that'd be more fair. So it's not LGBTQ, it's BGLTQ. And that website is just gone. And it's a real shame because if you go on the Wayback Machine, which is a fun website that allows you to look at old websites, this site was a clearinghouse of information for LGBTQ students at Harvard. They had contact info for friendly staff, interns, tutors, a list of the Queer Advisory Council, a calendar, a newsletter. They had photographs of LGBTQ students looking happy, which the Trump administration clearly does not want to see. And so that website is gone, and in its place is a very generic website called the Office of Culture and Community, which has virtually no information on it, just some boilerplate statements about, bringing people together, but it's not the same. And the office is still available for people on Facebook and Instagram, but again, that information is a little bit more tricky to find on those 2 sources. So LGBTQ students at Harvard don't have this resource to use, which is a real shame. In addition, various schools within Harvard have started replacing their diversity offices, renaming them, even firing staff in some cases. And again, all of these things relate to that federal funding and the threat of withholding. So Harvard and Trump apparently are still in negotiations. And so this is obviously a part of that, but it's just a real shame this had to happen because those students need these resources.
I should probably say at this point, for another 2 weeks, I still am a tenured full professor of education at Baldwin Wallace University, literally teaching diversity in higher education. So holy crud, do I feel this deeply. And the landscape here in Ohio is quite a mess when it comes to DEI. I get the sense that Indiana right next door is experiencing some similar things, Lauren?
Yeah, there's a few things going on. And there are certainly a few things that have changed for queer students. So there's a new Indiana law that seeks to ban hiring and firing practices based on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that, of course, extends to LGBTQ folks. The original version of that measure went much, much farther, and we would have seen something a little bit more similar to what we're seeing in Harvard. That version of the measure was defeated, but because of budget constraints from the state, universities preemptively eliminated DEI positions and took steps a little bit farther. The quieter version of what we're seeing in Indiana is actually something that was added at the last minute to the Indiana state budget. So we're seeing now a lot of humanities courses getting chopped by the state's Commission for Higher Education. That includes courses like Women's and Gender Studies, Africana Studies, and courses on queer literature. And that, of course, was added last minute to the budget under the banner of economic responsibility and efficiency. So many students are seeing programs and courses eliminated, and we've heard from some professors that they're being pushed out or forced into retirement who focused on these topics.
There are some bright spots. Jake, I was reading about a new queer studies certificate at Illinois State University. And if this news is so gay gets one day accredited, which would be really inappropriate, but that'd be amazing, I assume we will just automatically get one of those certificates. But tell us about Illinois and what that looks like for LGBTQ plus issues in higher ed.
Yeah, it's honestly a little bit of a mixed bag here in Illinois. We've seen schools like ISU doubling down on LGBTQ plus inclusion, which I think is optimistic and hopeful. It shows how we can institutionalize LGBTQ knowledge and history while supporting the community. But then there's schools like Columbia College, where I actually graduated from, for example, where several of its DEI programs and staff titles have been rebranded to avoid words like diversity. So their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office is now known as the Office of Equity and Belonging. The school promises that its values haven't changed and the work hasn't changed, but it really does affect the visibility and how easy it is for people to find those resources online and access them. But then on the flip side, there's schools like Illinois Wesleyan University, which recently introduced a rainbow floor in its student housing. So that's essentially gender inclusive dorms that students can access. It's designed to be helpful for LGBTQ plus people. They've also rolled out a map to all of its single stall and gender neutral bathrooms and reiterated supports like their preferred name change process, their allied trainings for faculty, and then they have LGBTQ plus terminology education. So we're seeing a little bit of everything here in Illinois. There are schools that are capitulating, but then there are schools that are saying, no, we're going to double down and hold our ground and stick with the LGBTQ people here.
There is no greater memory in my life than being an RA at New York University, and that pales in comparison to the possibility of being the RA on the rainbow floor. So if that position opens up, Jake, let me know because I will go back and do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I wish I had a rainbow floor when I was in college. I lived with these dudes who were just disgusting. So,
Oh boy. Well, let's pivot back to Indiana for a second. A pastor in Indiana took to the pulpit recently, not to preach love and acceptance, but with a very different message. And that message certainly went viral. Lauren, I have to assume this story was on your radar of a very not love thy neighbor message.
Yes, and to say that it was not a love thy neighbor message would put it extremely mildly. At a recent Sure Foundation Baptist Church's men's preaching night, Stephen Falco said queer people attacked children and that we should blow out our heads. After the video of the preaching went viral, the church's lead preacher, Justin Zhang, doubled down on the remarks to local press and said, I will not apologize for preaching the word of God. Though, as part of that doubling down, the church clarified that they weren't seeking vigilante justice, but instead government sponsored executions. Local church groups pushed back, including Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis, which speaks out on a wide variety of issues, including racism and gun violence. They said such messages are not only theologically irresponsible, but pastorally dangerous. And they also said true holiness is not about who we hate, it is about how we love.
I'm a gay Jew from New Jersey, so I don't know the word of God. That's not in my wheelhouse per se. But yeah, that strikes me that is not not the message. One of the reasons that we put together This News Is So Gay was to be able to have reporters from across the country. And so for folks who have never been to Indiana, I don't want people walking away thinking, oh, yeah, this is what Indiana is like. And in particular, Indianapolis, which I thought is a blue spot in a red state, is it not?
So I grew up here in Indianapolis. I grew up about 7 miles from the Indiana State House. And Indiana's more complicated than that, which is a little bit of a rallying cry that I will never die on. As we all know, as queer people, geography doesn't always telegraph safety by any stretch of the imagination. The Sure Foundation Baptist Church isn't all that far away from my own home.
Mm.
And I'm both a gay woman and a reasonably devout Catholic. Like I said, grew up here in one of the most conservative parishes in the city. And as an out adult, I only found out later that some of the very families I grew up with had actually moved to my parish after they found other Catholic parishes in the city to be too welcoming. But even considering some of the places that are surprisingly welcoming in Indiana, Columbus, Indiana is Mike Pence's hometown, and it has this vibrant art scene because of local government investment and an incredible pride parade every year. And Indiana's first out transgender elected official is Veronica Pedrell. She didn't serve in Indianapolis. She served in Greencastle, the county seat of Putnam County, which voted nearly 75% for Donald Trump in 2020, the same year she was elected to her county seat. So Indiana's a politically complicated state. I think the vast majority of people in Indiana would fall into the political science definition of libertarian, and most divide themselves based on how much or how little government should be involved in the religious character of its citizens. I joke fairly often with my colleagues in other states that an Indiana Democrat is really an Illinois Republican. And the core long-time leadership of the Indiana Democrats aren't particularly progressive. And we've seen that slide from the far left of the spectrum since way back with Eugene V. Debs founding the American Democratic Socialist Movement in Terre Haute, Indiana. And in fact, some of those longtime leaders of the Indiana Democratic Party, many of whom represent Indianapolis, are the same lawmakers that LGBTQ advocates over the last several years have criticized for walking back their support against Indiana's flood of anti-trans legislation.
I love the idea that we just started some sort of Indiana-Illinois turf war right on This News Is So Gay, and Jason and I will just sit back and watch what happens now. So, yeah, that's incredible. I want to talk about there was a protest last weekend outside of Trump Tower to rally against the Trump administration's decision to shut down the 988 suicide prevention lifeline option for LGBTQ plus youth. And that's going to shut down next week. And this is one of those stories that when we covered an Ohio angle of this in the Buckeye Flame, it was one of those stories where my mom called immediately, and shout out Terry Schnack, she is listening, huge LGBTQ ally and reads the Buckeye Flame all the time. Even she said, wait, how is this even a thing where we're cutting off services? And I get the sense that my mom is not alone in this. Jake, talk to us about, I was reading there are some legislators in Illinois who are speaking out on this topic.
Yeah, exactly. This is really a story where I think people on all sides of the aisle can really see how important a service like this is. Whether or not you agree with LGBTQ people, I think we can all agree that people deserve to live, and have resources like this. So that's why U.S. Rep. Raja Krishnamurti from here in Illinois wrote this bipartisan letter calling for the cuts to be stopped. Krishnamurti, he worked with Mike Lawler from New York and Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, and together they sent this letter last month, to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, basically saying, you've got to stop these cuts. This is a life-saving service and we need to continue it. It's fielded more than 1.3 million calls, texts, and other messages. And that just really shows what, I don't know if success is the word, but how much it's helped people, and how much need there is for it too. So to see something like that now be reversed is really heartbreaking.
I went back a couple years and saw a Philadelphia Gay News story about a program in Philly with their own version of the hotline. Jason, tell us about that one, and I hope it's still around.
It is still around. It's Philadelphia's local version of 988, put out by the Department of Behavioral Health. It rolled out in 2022 to great success. In 2025, the first 3 months of the year, they averaged 70,000 calls per month. So it is quite a used service. And the thing about healthcare and crisis centers is that depending on where you are in the country, you may or may not get somebody who is LGBTQ culturally responsible and understands the issues related to being LGBTQ. In Philly, we're lucky that we have a health department that understands that that is a real issue. And so every operator at the crisis control centers in Philadelphia, they are trained in LGBTQ cultural competency, including coming out, what people go through. They're also trained in the various social determinants of health, including housing and food insecurity. So the one saving grace, I guess, for Philadelphians is that regardless of whether the specific option goes away, you are most likely going to get somebody who is very, very culturally sensitive to your issues.
So we need more of that. Philly's got to get out there and replicate that in cities all over the place. Again, you are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. I'm joined this week by Jason Villemez from Philadelphia Gay News, Jake Wittich from Windy City Times, and Lauren Chapman from Indiana Public Broadcasting. And now, for the first time, we are pivoting to sports ball. 3 new WNBA teams will be joining the roster: Cleveland in 2028, Detroit in 2029, and Philadelphia in 2030. Lauren, we've already decided you are the official sports ball correspondent for This News is So Gay. I would put that on LinkedIn, so you should
Thank
add
you.
that right away. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
But I also know that you previously worked at a basketball magazine, which qualifies you for this role. I am told by others that know better that these expansions are a big deal for queer representation and LGBTQ plus sports ball fans.
Yes, absolutely. And just to say it out loud, I've never been felt more delightfully perceived than in this particular moment. So Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia actually joined 2 other previously announced expansions for Toronto and Portland, Oregon. The WNBA's announcement credited the choices to market viability, economic support, and potential fan base. And that last note, I think, is the one that actually answers your question best. The 3 expansion cities are well-known, rabid fan cities. I mean, these are fan bases that live and breathe their professional sports, and it shows the significant shift that we've seen over the last several years, pumped with adrenaline by the Caitlin Clark effect, which would only exist because of Angel Reese. But as a sports fan, it also indicates something fascinating about acceptance in mainstream sports. The WNBA is gay as hell. Some of the best storylines in the WNBA are when wives and girlfriends and fiancés are playing against or with one another on the court. It is a league of queer players living out loud. And when we look at Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, we don't see that kind of representation in those leagues. I only got to attend my first Pride Night baseball game going to a Houston Astros game in 2023. We are seeing the recognition of the economic power of 2 major sports fan groups, LGBTQ sports fans and women. And I'm really excited to see how these expansions work out. In those 3 cities, Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia, those fan bases will show up for anything. And I'm rooting for all of them to really play out with this.
Everyone's really excited here about the expansion in Cleveland. Are folks excited there in Philly, Jason?
It's about darn time, is what I got to say about that. This is the 4th largest TV market in the country, one of the largest population centers in the country. How did we not have a WNBA team until now? It's mind-boggling. So thank you, Wanda Sykes, for spearheading the effort, gotta say. This will be the first major women's pro sports team in Philly, so we're super excited. You have the NWSL, the Women's Soccer League, having teams in DC, New York, Boston. Philly always gets left out, so I'm excited that we did not get left out this time. So now a lot of us are focused. Number 1, they're going to get a brand new stadium, which we're really excited about. Number 2, what is the name going to be? My favorite is the Philadelphia Broads. Not only because it aptly describes a lot of Philadelphians, but also our main street in Philadelphia is Broad Street. Some people like the Philadelphia Johns, but that's more of a local term. People don't really know what John means. And then there's Philadelphia Freedom, which is the iconic Elton John song. We used to have a tennis team in Philadelphia called the Freedom as well. So we'll see about that name, but I'm hoping for the Broads.
And I should be fair here and say this is not new for Cleveland. We actually did have the Cleveland Rockers a number of years ago, and then they went away, and now they're coming back. And I think we are pretty settled on the Rockers. But also in Philly, a new women's sports bar.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to get a new women's sports bar. Philly hasn't really had a women's-centric bar since 2013. This Bar Sisters shut down at that point. people have been really clamoring for space like that. So the bar is going to be called Marsha's after Marsha P. Johnson. It's going to be on South Street, which is one of the most hopping streets in Philadelphia, always on the weekends, packed with people. So that's really exciting. And the founder of the bar, Siobhan Anderson, she went to a bar in 2019 and she tried to watch the women's soccer World Cup final between the USA and Netherlands. And the bar was really giving her grief. They didn't want to put it on because they thought it wasn't important. And it's a women's World Cup. It's the worldwide most pinnacle of soccer. And you're not going to put that on? Come on. I was in a bar in DuPont Circle during the Tony Awards, and I asked them, we are in one of the gayest spots in DC. Can we watch the Tony Awards? And they told me no. They told me they wanted to put on Queer as Folk. And I'm like, really? I get it, but it's the Tony Awards. So I do know what it's like to have a bar, not understand its clientele. So really exciting for Marsha's to be opening later this summer.
As the RA of the Rainbow Floor, we will be watching the Tony Awards, just so everybody
Perfect.
understands. And we just got one too. The W Women's Sports Bar actually opened in my neighborhood, and I almost went. I haven't been yet, and I feel bad. I almost went on Saturday for the finals of Wimbledon, and good thing I didn't because it was really bad. It was a bad final. It ended not well, but yeah, yay for expansions. All right, we need more women's sports bars. After last week's episode, I got some feedback that too many of our stories were depressing, which is not the fault of me, but mostly of the legislators who are passing the things that we're talking about. But let's focus on some LGBTQ plus good news, and particular things that you all have worked on. Jake, I enjoyed immensely your piece on State Senator Mike Simmons. Tell us about Senator Simmons.
State Senator Mike Simmons, he's here in Illinois, and he announced last week that he is running for Congress in the 9th District. And what's pretty exciting is he's one of 2 people who are from our community running for Congress at the moment right now. Who knows, maybe more could join in. But Kevin Morrison, who's a Cook County commissioner, is also running in the nearby 8th District. So it's just really cool to see potential for more LGBTQ people to elevate to higher office, especially at the national level. Mike Simmons became a state senator in 2021, and since then he's passed nearly 50 bills, which is a lot for a legislator, especially here in Illinois. Not many pass a ton, if any. So really cool. And his bills have championed human rights and economic equity. He's helped erase medical debt for hundreds of thousands of people in Illinois. He created a statewide child tax credit. And then one of his first things he did in office actually was he got hair discrimination banned in Illinois, which especially supports Black and brown people. But I think queer people also benefit from that hair discrimination ban. So in Congress, he really wants to build on this work. He's told me he's focused on expanding healthcare access, making the economy more accessible to people throughout the various classes, and defending human rights, especially at this moment.
In more good news, Jason, I have absolutely no idea where Collingdale is, but I'm told that Collingdale, Pennsylvania, it's a lot better to be gay there now?
It is. Yeah, Collingdale is a small little borough. It's about 20 minutes driving south of Philadelphia. The thing about Pennsylvania is we don't have a statewide non-discrimination law. Democrats have been trying to pass this law for decades and haven't had the trifecta of the state senate, state house, and governorship. So they haven't been able to do that. So we're left with these local ordinances around the state, kind of a piecemeal approach. Collingdale just passed this is crazy, one of the most protective non-discrimination laws in the country, really. They have over 24 protected classes, including people living with HIV, non-binary people, intersex people, domestic abuse survivors, people with long COVID, classes based on weight, income, and age. It protects the most people by far of any non-discrimination bill in the state. It also redefines what an employer is, which is actually a really vital tool. So in the state of Pennsylvania, an employer is defined as someone who employs at least 4 non-family members. But Collingdale adjusted that definition to just be someone who employs 1 or more people, which is great because you do find a lot of people working for somebody just off the clock, single person doing work for them, and they discriminate against them. They will now have recourse for their employment, which they wouldn't have otherwise. And they also wouldn't have in any other part of the state. So really proud of Collingdale for what they've done.
And on behalf of the Collingdale Tourism Department, why would I go there? What is there for me?
Collingdale's great. They've got a little nice main street. Again, they've got lots of surrounding areas, lots of greenery, lots of city parks. It's really fun.
I
So
love it.
you should come, Ken. You should come as soon as you can.
Okay. Again, that's Jason Villemez from the Collingdale Tourism Department. I'm getting you a side hustle right there, right away. And although I know this is not explicitly an LGBTQ plus story, Lauren, you have to tell our listeners about Vera McConnell. I enjoyed that piece immensely.
Thank you so much. It is a little bit gay. Let's be real. It's a little gay. And I personally would follow Vera McConnell into war. To understand her story, you have to know a little bit about the Girl Scouts. So, unlike Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts get our ranks based on age: daisies, brownies, juniors, cadets, seniors, and ambassadors. But we do massive projects like our Boy Scouts counterparts to earn awards: bronze, silver, and gold awards. As a 12-year veteran of the Girl Scouts myself, I earned my bronze and silver awards, but I did not get my gold award. Vera McConnell, on the other hand, made her gold award project removing the so-called pink tax on menstruation products and adult diapers. Indiana lawmakers are constitutionally mandated to pass a balanced budget, so things were already looking a little tight heading into this legislative session. But Vera, this 15-year-old high school junior, testified before lawmakers, met with them outside of committees, got a lobbyist to help her, and even got her project picked up as one of the Senate Democrats' priorities for the legislative session. The sad news, it didn't pass. She got the House to eliminate the pink tax in the budget, but in the face of a $2.4 billion shortfall, the tax cut was eliminated in the Senate's version. The good news: the last time we spoke, Vera told me that the work that she did still qualified for her gold award regardless of the outcome, and she promised me she would be back at the State House to advocate for as long as possible.
Aw, shout out to Vera.
We love her.
We love her. Well, we don't typically read a headline about trans athletes and have it be a positive story. As we discussed last week, the Supreme Court is taking up this issue during its upcoming session, and experts are not predicting a great outcome for trans athletes. But in Pennsylvania, Jason, a not terrible outcome for trans athletes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, shout out to Pennsylvania Democrats in Harrisburg. Those are some of the smartest legislators in the country. So anytime Republicans are going to have a rule-based issue that they're going to force, the Democrats are going to have a rule-based response to it. So the Pennsylvania State Senate passed a ban on trans athletes, forcing them to compete in the gender of their birth. The legislation was referred to the House, and it was put into the Education Committee. There's a procedure called a discharge resolution, which means that if a piece of legislation is stuck in committee with no action for 15 session days, if 25 lawmakers sign a petition, they can force the bill out of committee. Democrats saw this coming, and they actually re-referred the bill to a different committee, the Health Committee. So they bought some time with this. And I think one of the things Republicans were trying to do is they're trying to force a vote because they believe that they may have one or two Democrats who will vote with them. And Democrats only have a one vote majority in the House. So I think their line of thinking is that they can get one or two Democrats in conservative areas to vote for the legislation. Either way, it's DOA when it reaches Governor Shapiro's desk. And so this is kind of an exercise in foolishness because the legislation is effectively dead, whether or not it passes the House. So again, shout out to our Democratic colleagues who understand and they use all the rules to their advantage. I think Democrats nationally could learn a lesson from them.
On the other side of the coin, Lauren, you have been reporting on Indiana's ban on trans athletes for literally years now, Lauren.
Yeah.
This is still a topic that we're talking about in Indiana?
Yes. So Indiana lawmakers passed a ban on transgender girls participating in girls' school sports. It was vetoed by then Governor Eric Holcomb, but then immediately overturned by the General Assembly in a one-day session. Fast forward to this past legislative session, following a Trump executive order earlier this year, the Indianapolis-based NAACP updated its transgender athlete policy to ban transgender women from participating in collegiate athletics. Indiana lawmakers had already proposed a measure to do the exact same thing, and in fact, the author of that bill was there when Trump signed that executive order. That measure, the week after the executive order, got a hearing and began to move its way through the state house. Critics of the measure point to its redundancy, serious concerns about what evidence is going to be required for athletes who are challenged under this bill, including genital exams, its potential abuse for cisgender women athletes, and obviously the available scientific evidence that suggests that transgender women perform worse than their cisgender counterparts. It is also worth noting that this particular measure this year became a bit of a bellwether for Indiana State at the Indiana State House for Democratic lawmakers who walked back their support of LGBTQ Hoosiers. Advocates said at the time, you can't show up in June at a pride party and say you just support trans people, and then when bills come before you, vote against those same rights.
Jake, I was reading through your piece talking to U.S. Representative Robin Kelly, who has thrown her hat in the ring to replace retiring U.S. Senator Dick Durbin. And she is pledging to only confirm pro-LGBTQ plus judges. That's part of her platform. Is that a stance that would play well in Illinois?
I think so. Illinois, it's a blue state, largely because of the Chicago area. There are definitely are red areas of Illinois, but overall, I think Illinois really aligns itself with LGBTQ plus rights and protections. We were the 16th state, I think, to legalize same-sex marriage, and that happened in 2014. And then since then, Illinois has really established itself at being on the forefront of passing LGBTQ plus rights and protections, whether that's in the form of like our Comprehensive Human Rights Act, which protects people based on their gender identity. Not a lot of human rights acts do that. We've also banned conversion therapy. We've introduced an inclusive curriculum law, and that's just really scratching the surface of the pro LGBTQ plus laws and protections we have here in the state. So I think it is popular. It's going to be an interesting race. Robin Kelly is up against our Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, as well as Raja Krishnamurti, who I mentioned earlier with the letter about the suicide hotline. So we've got three strong allies in this race, it seems. It's going to be really interesting to see who wins.
They could all just try to out pro-LGBTQ the other ones. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Well, finally, NBC Out reported this week that the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice will launch a digital archive this fall featuring articles, photos, videos, telegrams, speeches, and more tied to Rustin's heroic work. Sourced from museums, archives, and personal accounts, it's going to be designed as a central space where others can add their own stories and create a living historical record. So what I need from all of you, what LGBTQ plus rights icon would you like to spend the day immersed with? Lauren Chapman.
Honestly, Bayard Rustin is a really good choice, but I think I have to go with Sylvia Rivera. I love any human being willing to challenge allyship's tendency to ignore intersectionality. I feel like there are dozens of modern politically involved drag queens who are carrying on her legacy of justice-minded fury and scorn.
Jake Wittich, who do you want to spend your day immersed with?
I'm going to say Miss Major. I've interviewed her a few times. She visited Brave Space Alliance, which is a Black and trans-led organization on the south side of Chicago. And I covered her visit there. She was at the DNC, so I chatted with her there. And every time we talk, it's just so inspiring. I get nuggets of wisdom. But to spend a whole day with her would just be phenomenal.
Amazing. Jason Villemez, who are you choosing?
I'd want to spend the day with Magnus Hirschfeld. He was a doctor in the early 20th century in Germany who created the Institute for Sexual Sciences, which was the first institute to really study LGBTQ people. He instinctively knew that we are everywhere, every city, every country, every corner of the earth. His research and documents were burned by the Nazis at the start of the war. And so he saw sort of the rise of Nazism. And I'd love to just pick his brain on what is happening today and see if he had any advice, any thought. Please help us, Magnus.
Let's talk about the stories on which all of you are working. Jason, what are you working on?
We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Philadelphia Gay News, 1976 to 2026. It's crazy. So I've been going through the archives, the photo archives and the print archives, just to see sort of what we're going to put in the issue. And one thing that stuck out to me about the 70s and 80s is there were a lot of protests back then, like way more than we have today. People were protesting everything in the 70s and 80s, especially as it related to the LGBTQ community. There's a protest about Miss Saigon for having stereotypical Asian women, which, again, don't be afraid, people. Like, if something angers you, bothers you, build a coalition and make your voice heard. So really excited about that. It's going to be a really awesome 50th anniversary issue next year for the PGN.
Amazing. Jake, is this an anniversary year for Windy City Times?
It is ours too. This is our 40th anniversary, so we've been doing a lot of programming throughout the year. We have an exhibit at the Gerberhardt Library and Archives, which is the largest queer archive in the Midwest, and it's basically a retrospective of our history. It's really cool to look at. Like my favorite thing in that exhibit, there's a photo of Tracy Bain, our co-founder. She's 24 years old, interviewing Mayor Harold Washington, and it's just so cool to see her doing that in action. So
we should highlight to our listeners, Tracy Bain at 24 years old. That was only 3 years ago. We just want to put that out there. What are you working on, Jake?
A lot more political reporting. The primary season is really heating up. A lot more people are entering the race. I mentioned Juliana Stratton and Raja Krishnamurti. I'm working on setting up interviews with the two of them. And I'd like to go a little deeper in our election coverage. Normally, we only interview the out LGBTQ plus people that are running. But if I could expand that, I think it's really important for people to know what cisgender straight politicians are doing for our community, for other communities as well.
Amazing. How about for you, Lauren Chapman? What are you working on?
I'm figuring out a few projects in the hopper, but I would love to direct folks to a silly little game that I made that has recently won national awards. I wanted to figure out how to explain Indiana's legislative session, or how the legislative session worked in the nerdiest way humanly possible. So I made an Oregon Trail style video game to walk you through the process, complete with dysentery jokes and actual helpful resources for contacting lawmakers, testifying in committee, everything along the way.
So amazing. Oh, I love hearing things like that. I want to thank this week's roundtable, Jason Villemez from Philadelphia Gay News, Jake Wittich from Windy City Times, and Lauren Chapman from Indiana Public Broadcasting. Thank you all so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was fun.
I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, and that's all we have time for on this week's episode. If you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend and subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.